people who support Black Lives Matter, people who support the left, a lot of them think that they are in possession of radical political opinions. This has been said 1,000 times. How radical is your opinion when the cops and the National Guard are kneeling and doing the Macarena, dancing with protesters, and every major corporation has put out a message and donated money to this cause? How radical are your opinions really? The people who are spray painting cop cars and burning cop cars and smashing windows and whatnot, how radical are your opinions really when these actions are allowed to take place? Because it's not the case that it's a tactical decision. It's not like the cops and the National Guard couldn't crack down on this if they wanted to. It's that it's being allowed to happen. And if you think otherwise, you're a fool.
This is Louis, otherwise known as Five Take Man. Five Take Man that stumbles over his words, that can't say simple words, and thus can't get a fucking commentary done. I'm back to talk to you about astroturfing, what that is. Is it the sort of a plastic grass that is put on football fields, or is it something to do with politics? Well, it's both. Astroturfing is the use of an artificial event created by a political organization for the purposes of pretending that they actually have grassroots support among the constituency in whatever area. The point is to create a photo opportunity for a politician or for a party to present itself as representative of the people, when in reality it is using dollars fundraised through rich people and party loyalists to feign popularity. Neither political party, as far as I can tell at this moment in time, is particularly popular, and I find that understandable. The Democratic Party has no platform outside of free shit and socialism. That appears to be what the political party represents at this point, which is the primary reason I left the party and joined the opposite. But really, the Republican Party is not much better. Recently, there have been a few Republican politicians, including senators, that have come out and embraced Black Lives Matter as conservatives, even though, I'm philosophical liberal, but I don't really understand why you endorse an organization that on its mission statement says that it's anti-nuclear family. It is a socialist organization that's entire goal is to overthrow the U.S. Constitution and our government. I'm not really sure why a sitting senator would endorse all of those things, because they don't seem particularly conservative, but that is the nature of the Republican Party. It is a party of spineless appeasers, unfortunately, and that's why I would like it that the Nationalists, of which I am included in that, and there's many people within the party itself that are the base, that are nationalists, I want us to take over the party and expel all the internationalists, because it seems that the one thing tying together all of the weakest members of the party, and all those currently, and I could do a video on this, I'm deciding whether I'm going to or not, all the people that are currently actively campaigning for the Republicans to lose this upcoming election, and there are Republicans campaigning for the Republicans to lose, and so-called conservatives campaigning for Republicans to lose. If you look at their resumes, what ties them all together? What is the underpinning that ties them all together? It's pursuit of money, so being a professional politico, a strategist, a consultant, all that. They're all tied together in that. But more importantly, the ideological end of it is internationalism, which in my view is just the empty pursuit of self-interest. Just, I want money. What's the best way to do this? Well, let's undercut domestic labor, domestic production in pursuit of, cheap lobbying and money from elsewhere. That is internationalism. It's an ideology of self-interest at the expense of your home nation. As a nationalist, that offends me. That's why I'm the opponent of that ideology and of those that espouse it and try to put it into policy, because, one, they don't care about the left-right dynamic. They don't really care about winning. It's just about money. Because win or lose, the left is incredibly internationalist, so either way you get your goal. So that is why I think it is up to us, the base, the constituency, to defeat these people within the party and expel them to the best of our ability, because they're not interested in winning. They're not interested in conservative politics. They're not interested in conservative philosophy. They're not interested in helping your family, protecting our nation. They're not interested in any of the things that maybe you as a Christian, a conservative, a traditionalist, whatever you are, they're not interested in any of those things. What they're interested in is internationalism and lining their own pockets, and that is it. That is the beginning and end of what they believe and what they're after. So that is why, by all means, they can go to the left and lose while we win. That's great. That benefits us. But either way, they have to go. We have to pursue this. Because so long as they're present, we're going to lose. Because I got to tell you, if you're running around endorsing Black Lives Matter as a Republican senator, you're going to fuck this party. You're going to fuck the election. And I'll speak to that with Trump as well. There's a bunch of stories going around about his frustration, allegedly, with Jared Kushner and his policies, because while there's a crime wave going on in states across the nation, including all across New York, there's a fucking crime wave, and I'll see if I can find an article for you about that. But while there's a crime wave going on across the nation, coming from a certain jogger demographic, the GOP is pushing prison reform. And that is from Jared Kushner. But Trump is going along with it, or has been at least until recently. And I gotta say to people like Sargon and others who aren't paying attention as closely as they should be, there is very few reasons to vote for the Republicans and for Trump at this point. Because while they can have a good speech at Mount Rushmore, all they do is talk. Talk, talk, talk. And in terms of actually passing legislation or doing anything to take care of these monumental issues that they could have day one in 2016, it's 4 years late. It's 4 years catching up. Even Trump is talking today on Twitter about removing tax-exempt status for certain schools, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't matter. You got to pass legislation. You have to go through Congress. Congressional Republicans actually have to pass something. They passed tax cuts in 2016, and they've done nothing since. So for your base to have a reason to vote for your party and for politicians, you have to give them a reason. It can't be a platform of something that you should have done 4 years ago or 2 years ago when you lost control of the House. 4 years later, it's not enough to pull that lever, in my view. And it's why I haven't endorsed Trump. It's why I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. It's a guaranteed vote, any of that. Because to me, it doesn't matter how many speeches I hear from Trump that I like, or how many tweets he puts out that I retweet for you to see, and I do that. It's a lot of talk. It's a lot of talk, and it's been that way for 4 years. And while I got to say that with Trump, in his defense, he's not the king, but the fact is that he is in no way pushing the Republican Party, and especially the congressional Republicans, to do anything. You got to be overt. You have to engage in LBJ politics. And Trump seems to be that kind of guy, so it's amazing to me that he doesn't do that. We have seen no signs of the Republicans actually pushing this forward for Congress to do fuck all about anything. We're 4 years in, we're one term in, and nothing has changed outside of slight tweaks on certain things, to where we're building the wall, but there still might be amnesty from Trump. He's still, every once in a while, mouthing off to the press saying that amnesty is still on the table. And to me, that's completely inappropriate. But that's what it is. I understand incremental change. I fully understand that. I'm not, a radical in terms of my idealism. I understand pragmatic politics. I understand realism. That is more of my belief set when it comes to politics than anything else. But what I despise is the clear and present signs of pure laziness, pure apathy, total unwillingness to spend any political capital or take any risk pushing for what your base wanted from day one. And it's coming not just from congressional Republicans who are awful, but Trump himself. Speeches are nice, actions taken speak far louder. And that's an area in which that Trump has been inconsistent. Anyways, I know that that was in some ways a tangent, but I don't want this video to just be me dumping on the Democrats for a photo op, when my anger is not really in regards to them, because they've always been this way. It's been my entire life that the Democratic Party has been engaging in Astroturf campaigns and photo ops. I experienced this myself working for Kirsten Gillibrand for the extent that I did. Photo opportunities, speeches, events that you attend or you create yourself and pretend otherwise by going through a proxy, all of this is part and parcel of our political system. It's an industry, and part of that industry is creating marketing campaigns for your candidates and for your party. Nothing about this is in any way upsetting to me outside of times like this where, in my view, it crosses a line that I find to be too far. And it's because while I understand, let's say, having protection details for politicians using taxpayer dollars, I find that fine. Or you have a protest that's obviously AstroTurf, but you have to have policemen to keep order, maintain boundaries, set up perimeters, all that jazz. That's fine. But what I don't like are photo opportunities that are staged and ultimately created not by, political organizations, but by the government itself. So the government announces the actual event, and then the government creates the event. Not a political organization doing it on behalf of the Democrat Party, the politicians, whatever, but the city itself is the one that sets all this up, which is what it was here in New York City. This is not the first. I believe this is about the fourth time that I'm aware of this happening, where some group or the city or whoever painted Black Lives Matter on a public street. But in this particular instance, I find it to be egregious because, this is the surefire sign of a fucking AstroTurf event. You go online, you look up articles on the story, and I got 6 for you. In every single one of these articles, they lie about what happens. But it's just, let's say, NPR, USA Today, CNN, misrepresentation of the events of what happened, but not an outright lie. The Guardian, CBS, and AP outright fabricate what happened. So we're talking about everyone's lying. It's just a matter of 3 outlets lie in part, but at least give you enough context so that you can discover the truth for yourself, so you can read through the lines and realize what their lie is, which to me is just a matter of your outlet is so partisan in nature that you put the facts in the article, but you are unwilling to just say what happened. You're just unwilling to say the truth for what it is, that we have to discover by reading the full thing that you are in fact misrepresenting what happened. And then you have these other outlets that totally misrepresent what happened, totally lie, fabricate what happens in this instance. How unnecessary that is and how predictable it is with the press. And so here's the thing. 6 outlets lying. 0 tell the truth of what happened. None of them actually represent this instance accurately. All of them lie. But to give credit where credit's due, NPR, USA Today, and CNN don't lie completely. They actually give you enough facts so that you can understand what actually happened. It was yesterday, on the 9th, that the Department of Transportation, they blocked off a couple streets in New York City and painted Black Lives Matter on the street. So the events of what happened was Fifth Avenue, and it's said to be two streets, 56th, 57th, I don't remember which one. I'd have to reread these articles. They blocked off two streets and painted Black Lives Matter. So the question is who? Well, it was the Department of Transportation. They're the only people with the authority to actually block off these streets for the city to do this kind of work on a public street. The cops aren't going to do it. Protesters aren't going to do it. They're not going to be able to blockade these streets. So the Department of Transportation has to do it. And if you skim these articles and if you look at the video that the mayor himself posted, you can realize what happened. You had a whole fleet of DOT vehicles on scene, two trucks blocking off the streets with cones and with barricades, an entire crew of, road workers taking hours and hours to paint Black Lives Matter on this street. It took them hours to do this. They started it, they finished it. At no point were any protesters coming in helping them. These road workers, at taxpayer expense, started this project, ended this project. From beginning to end. There were no protesters involved in the painting of this so-called mural. This political statement on a street. It was simply DOT doing this from beginning to end. And if you look, you can find evidence of that. As they're finishing up the end stages, the whole thing is done. You see protesters in the background standing like in a pack. The protesters that you can find on scene are kept together in a pack, like sectioned together, cut off from everywhere else, like they're stood there and waiting for them to finish, and they're being told to stand there. They'd be spread out if this was anything but what it is, which is a staged photo op. So the politicos on scene are dealing with whatever activist group, whoever these people are that are shuttled in. They're telling them, stand there, don't move, don't get in the way, keep your feet off the paint, blah, blah, blah. Stand here in a group, just wait. The road workers finish, they leave, at least immediately from this scene. And then you have the photo op, where a handful of black people, the mayor, Al Sharpton, whoever else was there, you see them with the, paint rollers. They didn't paint any of this. They didn't finish this, they didn't begin it, they had no part in actually creating this mural. They had no part in this whatsoever. It was the road workers that did the whole thing. They just pretended to have a hand in it. And that's when all the photos were taken. And if you look on every single one of these fucking articles, that's what's presented to you. Every single one of these articles present to you the idea that the protesters, with the mayor's help, painted this themselves. That is what is presented to you. It requires you to read several articles to get the full picture of exactly what happened. That the mayor's office announced this, Trump reacted to this, the Department of Transportation showed up on scene, blockaded the roads, spent hours painting the street, finished up, and then the photo op occurred. What this requires is for every one of the journalists from all of these different outlets, all these outlets, I mean, it was probably at least a dozen that were on scene when this took place, that had people there when this took place. It required all of them to knowingly misrepresent the events of what happened. That this was unequivocally a photo op for a politician, for a political party, at the taxpayer's expense. Now, whether this is total partisanship and corruption on behalf of these outlets, or it is simply ideological in that they all support this Marxist movement, so that's why they choose to misrepresent the facts of what happened, it's up to you to decide. In many ways, with what we know about journalists, it's usually both. It's that they want to benefit by this incestuous relationship that they have with the Democrats, but also they stand for the ideological ruination of the United States. They want a socialist nation. They want us to, some want us to be some faggy social democracy in Europe that's just basically banking on rich people staying and being taxed 80% for the rest of their lives. And hoping that nothing changes, even though, I mean, in every one of those European nations that are like that, they're all ethno-states. Every single one of them are ethno-states. That's the only way they're able to get away with this, is that they're fucking ethno-states. And as you can imagine with the United States, we're definitely not. So when it comes to social democrats, like Tim used to espouse, Tim Pool used to say that that's what he was, they're fucking stupid. They're sort of like me, but substantially stupider. I'm an idealist, but in many ways when it comes to politics and when it comes to statesmanship, I'm a realist. I know that when it comes to, say, for example, criminality, I am, especially now, very harsh on criminals and criminality, because I know that assenting to it, acquiescing to it, only breeds more of it. This matters because, unfortunately, when it comes to politics, in our nation, in republics and democracies, you have to feign popularity to get what you want, because that's what's required when it comes to the popular vote. You have to be popular enough, even though it's a minority that votes, but you have to feign popularity in order to achieve your ends, because so often as it is, if you're not elected, you have no real power. But, unless you're on the Supreme Court. Then you can pass all the laws you want. So astroturfing is part and parcel of politics, but where it crosses a line to me is when you have to lie about your use of tax dollars. Because in my view, it's defensible to use tax dollars for, the RNC, let's say, Republican National Convention. You're going to need police to blockade streets, to keep back counter-protesters or protesters. You require public infrastructure and taxpayer dollars, even though you are a party and an organization hosting this thing, paying tons of money, but it requires taxpayer dollars in order for this thing to function. There's never going to be an event that is purely private, even though I'm sure all of us on the right would like that to be so. We want things to be at our expense and not necessarily the expense of people that politically disagree. In the same way that you, if you're a pro-life Christian, you don't want, your tax dollars going to pay for abortions. Whether it's your political event, even if it's, the event I went to with Sargon in Philadelphia, we still needed cops on scene. That isn't what we wanted, but it's what it was required, because we had a bunch of Antifa faggots come out and be like, we're going to fucking kill you. So we needed police on scene to prevent that from happening, and they were very cooperative, and everyone was enjoying it and talking to them and laughing it up, and it was fine. And I'm more than fine than having the cops there, because they seem to be on their shit and professional, because they've been doing this a long time. They know their stuff on how to police scenes, lock down areas, put up barricades, all that jazz, and keep people out and keep people separate. They know what they're doing, because that's how they've been trained. Politics can involve taxpayer dollars and still be fine, justifiable, because they're just, for practical measure, there just isn't an alternative that wouldn't require an infinite amount more money and a very short notice and, something that would basically be unfeasible for the event, so you'd have to cancel it. And when it comes to realpolitik, you don't want to do that, because that's you looking weak. Even if that is your personal politics and beliefs, and it is including mine, eventually you're going to be put upon to where you're going to be forced to compromise, or compromise in such a fashion that you will regret it, because it's going to make you look weak and it's going to give a scalp to your enemies. And so if the question is whether you do that or you bend your principles or even break your principles to achieve a certain end because you want people that paid a lot of money and drove or flew a long way to enjoy this event, you're going to go with that. At least I hope you are. I'm hoping that I'm making a decent point as it relates to this, that sometimes you're going to have to compromise. Sometimes, even if it is something outside of your ideal, you're just going to have to accept it for the sake of potentially achieving a better end the next time and settling for what you can get this time. So like I said at the beginning of this, incremental change is fine by me, but it's the pursuit of change that I'm looking to see. I want to see that in order for you to get my real support. I guess what I can say to put these people down is this isn't going to win you November. This stupid photo op isn't going to win you November. You embracing this Marxist organization that every once in a while you got some members going crazy talking about Jews, this isn't going to win you the election in November. And I think that's pretty clear. It's why you're bringing out Russia. It's why you're bringing out his tax returns. It's why you're going back to the same old Clinton playbook that lost in 2016. It's because you got nothing else to go on. You got no platform outside of free shit and socialism. You got nothing going for you. You have a weaker candidate than it was, John McCain, Mitt Romney, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. Name a Democrat candidate that has been this weak. I can't think of one in my lifetime. Kerry was pretty weak, and I had to look up his name to remember it. You've had weak Democrat candidates, but I don't think that we've had a weaker candidate in quite a long time, in decades. Because as weak as Romney, Kerry, all these people were, Joe Biden is demented, and he doesn't really have a true constituency. I saw Pew statistics from the other day, and I'll see if I can find them for you, where the question was, well, are you voting in favor of Biden or are you voting against Trump? And overwhelmingly, like it was last time, they're voting against Trump. And it's like, okay, well, that's what Clinton's campaign was. And she was a far superior candidate and campaigner and all the rest of it compared to Joe Biden. If the terms are the same, Biden's going to lose. And I think they know that still. But if we want Trump to win, if the Republicans and conservatives want me to vote for Trump, which as it stands, a lot of his supporters are still willing to vote for him. They're still very supportive of him. But if you want to get me fully on board, even as a finicky voter, I'm not purely Team Red, it requires you to put points on the board. It requires you to not just talk about the things that I'm concerned about, but to do them. And I understand you don't control the House, but there is such a thing as symbolic votes. Something's proposed in the Senate, President Trump endorses it, starts campaigning based on it, and it gets shot down in the House. That's a symbolic vote. That is astroturfing. It's an artificial event to show your base, to show voters, well, we're trying to pass this, but the Democrats are voting against it, so let's get them out of the House. They're not even doing that. They're not even doing that. I think I recall once in 4 years that that's been done, or it's been very publicly campaigned on, and I don't even remember what the fuck it was. In 4 years, I don't recall any other time but once that that's been done. And this is an election year, and it's not being done. Where are the congressional Republicans on any of these issues, outside of those on national television saying that they support Black Lives Matter? As always, when it comes to the right, unbelievably poorly organized, no political strategy outside of open borders and prison reform, amnesty, and I'm just sat here wondering why I'm going to vote Republican and for Trump in the fall. Why am I going to vote for you? I'm sat here thinking about that, and I can't really come to a conclusion outside of at least you're not the Democrats. At least Donald Trump is not Joe Biden. And that isn't much of a reason for you to win, okay? So there's a difference. There's me voting for you and you winning. And I know I'm not alone in that regard. I know there's quite a few people disappointed by this administration and especially by congressional Republicans. It seems that there's quite a bit of wrath going on right at the moment that's directed right at congressional Republicans, deservedly so. But what I'd like to see is some change. What I'd like to see is some people coming out, saying some things, and holding, symbolic votes, doing something to advocate that there's a platform for the right that isn't purely about Trump. This can't be the Trump election again. Because, after this election, then what? Are you going to have another Trump election? I don't think so. So the conservative movement, the fucking Republican Party, has to come to some kind of consensus as to what its aspirations are, what it's attempting to do, what's hoping to achieve, and to pursue that even when it's unable to, just to show that it is dedicated to that, at least from the position of something beyond bullshit rhetoric. All right? It's easy to talk, but just take that half step forward to show that you're at least willing to put your name on a vote for a particular issue, for something that your base wants. And as far as where I'm sitting, there's plenty that your base wants. Plenty outside of one tax cut bill that your fucking base wants. And you've achieved almost none of it in the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, you've achieved some tax cuts, and that is it. Your base is waiting there, starving to death, waiting for anything else, any tiny little morsel that they can munch on, and there's nothing. It's just, bleached bone. That's all there is. Of them gnawing on, get some nutrients from this bone of your tax cut bill from years ago. And that's been it. To summarize this, because I'm getting 50 fucking phone calls, there are ways in which to do political events that do not involve taxpayer dollars in such a manner such as this. And there are ways in which to reimburse public tax dollars when they are spent on your events. This was totally unnecessary. This appears to be a vendetta from Bill de Blasio against Trump in the name of this Marxist organization and during a statewide crime wave. Black Lives Matter, just not to fellow black people who are responsible for their murder rates. However, I will leave it there. Thanks for listening.